Well, good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me here at the Jamboree. My name's David Muir. I'm the Kent Regional Coordinator for Christian Aid. That means I get to go around the county visiting groups, and churches and people who support Christian Aid to let them know what we're doing and to support them as they support us. Thanks to Alan Noakes for arranging for me to be here. There'll be a question and answer session at the end, so really happy to take your questions. But if a question can't wait and you want to interrupt me, I'm happy with that. Just to let you know, I'm absolutely in awe of you guys camping. I was absolutely the world's worst scout. In fact, I got my first two badges on my arm the day I went up to Scouts. You needed those to go up to Scouts, but of course I don't need to tell you that. The first camping expedition I went on with the Scouts, it rained for the entire time. I contracted tonsillitis and had to go home early. As a result, I just can't do camping. So huge respect for your ability to camp in all weathers. I simply don't have that talent. Now, I know you've been here for a few days, and you may have missed a dreadful disaster that happened just yesterday. In fact, 25,000 people lost their lives in this disaster. They died because they didn't have enough to eat. Hunger claims the lives of 25,000 people every single day. And this is a disaster that just doesn't hit our headlines. We almost are used to the fact that there are people living in extreme poverty, dying from such things as hunger. But the greater tragedy of this one, in terms of hunger, is that it's entirely preventable. The world actually produces more than enough to feed every single human being. So why do people in today's world continue to live in extreme poverty? Without enough food, without enough clean water, without self-shelter, without education, with no access to medical care. And perhaps more importantly, what can we do about it? These aren't easy questions to answer in 30, 40 minutes, but we'll have a go. You see, global poverty is extremely complex, and I hope we can tear away some of those layers as we go in this talk. But, you know, each one of us really can make a contribution to tackling extreme poverty and bringing an end to the kind of disasters that I've just described. Now, I want to start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start, as Mary Poppins told us. And I want to start by going back 70 years, and I want to tell you a little bit about this guy. His name's Douglas Lister. At the start of 1947, this young Church of Army chaplain, Douglas Lister, was posted to Lüneburg in northern Germany to be part of a British garrison stationed there at the end of the Second World War. Now, Douglas wouldn't have been, you know, the same age as some of us here. He was in his mid-20s. I say some of us, I've moved on a little bit from that age range, but, you know, he was in his mid-20s, starting out his career. Soon after he arrived, Lister was asked if he could help some of the 80,000 refugees who a year earlier had fled the Russian army. They'd fled across the River Elbe to escape this oncoming military force. And Lister was taken down to the River Elbe, where in the fields by the river he saw mile upon mile of refugees living in tents, little more than a stove and a few blankets, and absolutely freezing, because it was at that time one of Europe's worst winters of that century. Now, of course, Lister said yes, he would help, And the first thing he did was he went to his army high command to seek their assistance so he could help the refugees. But they refused him. They told him that non-fraternization with the enemy was the order of the day. You see, these refugees were all German. But undeterred, he asked to be given permission to seek help elsewhere, and this he was allowed to do. So he wrote letters back to Scotland, and particularly to the churches, asking for their help. And very soon he was receiving literally tons of food and blankets and other items that people wanted to send to help him address the issue of refugees in Lüneburg. And this was the beginning of Christian Aid. Lister, among with other army chaplains, were doing kind of similar work with the post-war refugees in Europe. Together with the British Council of Churches, brought about an organisation called Interchurch and Refugee Service, and that later changed its name to Christian Aid. Now, over those 70 years, Christian Aid has been involved in all sorts of things and movements to tackle poverty and injustice around the world, from working with those post-war refugees to standing with the American civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s. We supported the South African apartheid movement in the 70s and 80s, and in the 90s we helped establish the Fair Trade brand in the UK, and also helped to work toward getting the poorest countries' debts cancelled. And through this time we've continued to work on long-term development programs through our many partners across the world, in Africa, in Asia, in the Americas. And today, this is what Christian Aid looks like.
What I think of Christian Aid is a gathering of people across the world who are like-minded, who believe the world can be different, that we can have a just and peaceful world if we pull together.
We don't go in with a big international agenda. We go and we offer friendship. We offer the possibility of walking alongside.
Y hay un elemento que nos identifica mucho con Christian Aid, que es la preocupación por el cambio de estructuras para poder superar la pobreza. O sea, la pobreza no se supera con donaciones, la pobreza se supera cuando comunidades se empoderan.
Christian Aid Week. This is the week when all the churches get together to help.
Here we are.
I feel as though I've achieved something, actually.
Christian Aid are here today as part of a global movement to campaign for climate justice.
We get involved in many issues, but we have to explain why is Christian Aid involved. Because at the heart, Christian Aid is the agency concerned about getting rid of poverty, making it a better world.
The hope most of us have for the future is a hope that our work gets less necessary. There's less poverty, there is less need. Realistically, I don't think we can take it for granted that that'll happen anytime soon. We will be needed, we've got to be there ready.
So today, Christian Aid is the aid, humanitarian and campaigning agency of Churches Together in Britain and Ireland. We work in 39 of the world's poorest countries with around 700 partner organisations in those countries who work on both our long-term development projects and our emergency humanitarian responses. And we work to help all people, people of faith and people of no faith. And we work with people of faith, all faiths and none. We are a Christian organisation, and it is our faith that drives us to work for the good of all, to bring an end to extreme poverty and injustice in our world. We've had another short film that I think has been played on site in the last few days, which you may have seen. I wanted to replay it here now. It's just a couple of minutes long, because it provides a core story that illustrates Christian Aid's three areas of work: development, emergency response and campaigning. And here it is.
This is Addie. Addie is a woman. In her community, often this doesn't work in Addie's favour. No one listens to her. This is a cow. Given to her by Christian Aid. Oh, good cow. The cow provides Addie with milk. Sometimes. Oh dear. When the cow does provide milk, Addie can make butter. It's quite a big job. The butter can be traded or sold, so Addie can buy what she needs to survive. And Addie can feed her children. Go on, kids, get stuck in. You see, where Addie lives, owning a cow does more than make a living. It gives Addie status, a voice. And now, people listen to what she has to say. With a cow, Addie and her friends can take part in making decisions for their community. Really big decisions, like working to end child marriage. Sometimes, all it takes is a cow.
So that was Addie. She lives in Ethiopia. That film was taken about 3 years ago, and at that time Addie's husband had died. All she had was one sheep and no, it was actually just one sheep. She didn't have goats, just one sheep. And she didn't really have enough even to provide her children with one meal a day. But through Hundi, who are our partner organisation in that region, Addie received a cow and 2 goats. And she was also introduced to a self-help savings group. And Addie and her children, their lives were hugely improved from that time on. But 2 years on, much of East Africa has been experiencing the worst drought in 50 years, and Ethiopia has been in a situation of extreme food crisis because of the drought. Over 5 million people are going hungry. So we caught up with Addie to find out how she was coping with this drought. Addie told us that the support she had received back in 2015 had made her family more resilient to drought. She said this, she said, "A lot of cattle died this year, And many people are still in need of support. They have nothing in their store. But I've been doing well, even during the drought. And although I'm not selling anything at present, and the cows aren't producing any milk, all my animals are fine. I don't have any problems for food for my family. I sold 1 cow and 8 goats so I could save the rest of my livestock. That is obviously a pretty good cattle and goat breeder. In comparison to others, she went on, I'm doing well. I have enough to buy fodder. I can afford to take my livestock to areas where there is water, and the savings group is still going strong. Even during the drought, we've kept saving. This savings group Adi refers to is a really kind of well-tested idea for helping a community. It's bringing a community together so that they can save. It's a bit like a credit union where you put some money in each month, and then when you need it, you can have your money back or even make a loan if you need it. And this is a very effective way of ensuring a community can help themselves. And that really is what development is all about, empowering people and communities to help themselves out of poverty. Good development practice is all about listening to the poor, to understand what it is they need, and then working with them through local partners so that they can achieve what they want. There's a very well-known phrase that illustrates this essential idea to good development practice. I'm sure you've heard of it. Give a man a fish, you feed him for today. Teach a man how to fish, and you fed him for a lifetime. It's all about enabling the poor to support themselves, not to rely on handouts. But if we push this idea a little, we can understand a little more about what poverty is like. It says, teach a man how to fish. But what about the women? Shouldn't it be teach a woman to fish? After all, the majority of farmers in our world today are women. Why shouldn't they fish too? Give a man and a woman a fish and you fed them for today. Teach them to fish. You fed them for a lifetime. Teach them how to sell their fish, and they'll be able to send their children to school. You see, in many poor communities, you have to still buy school uniforms and school books for the children to be able to go to school. And then what happens in the market where these two people are selling their fish? If there are cheaper imported foreign fish coming into their market, what should happen about protecting those fisher people's produce? And what if climate change means the lake they fish in is drying up? What are we going to do about that? Adi had other issues as well. If you noticed in that film, there were issues around culture and gender that contributed to her poverty. As a widowed woman, she had zero standing in her community. On the film it said no one would listen to her, but in her Ethiopian culture, cows provide status, and that meant when she received the cow through Hundi, our partner, she became a respected part of the community. She was no longer ignored. You see, disempowerment of women is a serious poverty issue around the world, and it's one Christian Aid does a lot of work on. It's no wonder that little film mentioned that Adi, once she'd regained status in her community, took on other issues of gender injustice like child marriage, another issue that causes huge suffering and poverty. So you see, poverty is really quite a complex thing, and it has to be tackled on different levels. Christian Aid does that through its development programs, as I've said, but we also do that as a campaigning agency, because we know that unless We challenge the systems and structures of our world that make and keep people poor. Our work, our development work, will only ever be like a sticking plaster on the open sore of global poverty, rather than actually curing the disease itself. What do I mean by that? I mean things like tackling climate change. Now, we've been making a noise about this issue for over 10 years. I think we were amongst the first development agencies to point out the link between climate change and global poverty. We know that the world's poorest communities not only already suffer from the devastating effects of climate change, but they're also going to be affected more than any of us here in the so-called first world. And yet, it's the poorest who've done least of all to contribute to the problem. Addie's community is affected by a severe drought in Ethiopia, the East Africa food crisis. Now, this is an area that is prone to drought, but climate change is intensifying these drought episodes and making it from a difficult situation to manage into an absolute emergency where people are literally dying because they're in a famine situation. Climate change will not only cause the disasters of famine, food and drought that we're seeing happening already around the world, but it will also lock in many millions into poverty from which they will not be able to escape. So our climate change campaign and other campaigns on other issues are our long-term international work to tackle the root causes of poverty. And we're increasingly seeing the world waking up and taking action on this issue of climate change. If you've ever done something around climate change, studied it, talked to other people about it, maybe sent an email to your MP, I want you to give yourself a big pat on the back, because it really is beginning to work. Things like the big Paris climate change agreement that took place is unprecedented in the majority of the world's countries coming together to agree how we're going to tackle this huge issue of climate change. And even with Donald Trump's bizarre extraction from that process, we are making progress. Lots of other organisations, of course, not only Christian Aid, work on this issue. There's still much to be done, but we're making progress. Now, our emergency work. Addie provides the link to our emergency response or humanitarian work. We always have a number of appeals raising funds for situations like the Africa food crisis that Addie's been caught up in, like the refugee crisis in Syria, Iraq and Europe. But I wanted to tell you quickly about work we did on Hurricane Matthew in Haiti. Last September, last year, Hurricane Matthew hit Haiti. The hurricane swept through Haiti, left a trail of devastation in its wake. Thousands of people lost their homes, crops were flattened, livestock swept away, livelihoods lost. Flooding contaminated the water, leading to the spread of cholera, and all those awful issues happening with over 2 million people affected. Now, working with our local partners in Haiti, we were able to do the kind of things you'd expect an agency like Christian Aid to do. So distributing hygiene kits, dry food parcels, clean drinking water, emergency shelter packs, and those kind of things. But something really stood out to us with this particular crisis. And that was that the work we did on an emergency in 2010, 6 years previously, when that terrible earthquake in 2010 hit Haiti. Some of you may remember that. The work that we did following that earthquake showed amazing fruits in this hurricane episode. You see, we built 700 earthquake resistant homes, and these homes survived Hurricane Matthew. Just one lost its roof. And so even though the families living in these houses suffered, you know, the loss of livestock farms and other things, they were safe. You know, over 1,000 people were killed by the hurricane. And not only were they safe, but they were able to offer their neighbours safety and somewhere to live during and after the hurricane. And that Haiti example highlights what we call our disaster risk reduction work. And that is the work we do to reduce the effects of a disaster like a hurricane or a flood or a drought or such like. These kind of dangers are increasing in our world, not least due to climate change. And so we increasingly work with communities that we're working with to help them prepare for times of danger. And we integrate this disaster risk reduction work into most of our development programs. So how could you get involved with Christian Aid? We are a fundraising organisation. We fundraise to enable our work that we do around the world. And you can get involved by helping our fundraising in your locality. There are two big fundraising events each year, Christian Aid Week and our Christmas Appeal. So Christian Aid Week takes place every May. During this week we put on the largest and longest running house-to-house collection in the country, with many thousands of people and groups and churches taking part. And we always need more people to help us with this. So if you think that you or your group could get involved, just contact us and we'll put you in touch with people in your area. And there's lots of other fundraising activities during Christian Aid Week. In recent years we launched a thing called the Big Brekkie. It's a fundraising breakfast. People do it in lots of different ways, for the community, just for a group of friends, doing it at night, doing it for brunch, doing it anytime, and fundraising for Christian Aid. Again, if you would like to get involved in that, just let us know. And then there's Christmas. We have a Christmas appeal each year. We focus on a particular story from our programs around the world. Our supporters do things like singing carols at train stations and rattling a bucket, putting on music nights or church collections. Again, you can get involved in doing some of those things. There's always lots of sponsored activities and events that people can do. Things like running and biking and trekking and walking and swimming. So all of these raise money for our work. And if you have an idea that's not one of those, you want to do an event, a special event that you've dreamt up, that you'd like to do as a sponsored activity, we've got great resources that can support you in that. All that relevant information around how that works can be found on the website, or of course I can send it to you. If you'd like to give regularly to Christian Aid, you can do that. That's a particular program that we have where you give what you like each month, and then we send you updates on our work and how your money is being used. We have lots of volunteers in Christian Aid as well. We have volunteer teachers that go around schools talking about the work we do. We have volunteer speakers that go around churches speaking about the work we do. We have people that come into our offices to help us, and event volunteers. Of course, these really are for 18 and over, but if that's something that you think you'd like to find out more about, again, just contact us. We have a number of websites. Our main one, the website address is up there, or just Google us. We have the Christian Aid Collective website as well. Again, just Google that to find us. That's our young people's group who I think it's among some of the best work we do in this country. They're a fantastic group of people, so do check them out online. And that's me, and that's my email address. If there's something you'd like to ask me about or find out more about, and you want to contact me directly, I'd love you to do that. So just get in touch. So I think I'm going to break here and see if anybody's got any questions. Oh, I see somebody's got a question down there. Let me bring the mic down and we'll see what he wants to ask.
You've talked about some of the disasters around the world that you've helped with, etc. Have you any personal experience of going out to any of these countries, or friends that have been out to these countries that could relay what's actually happened to them while they were there, and how they've experienced that?
I'm going to run back onto the stage and feedback. So, yes, I've been overseas with Christian Aid to Uganda, to Kenya, and to Sierra Leone. I visited our long-term development programs there, saw firsthand the work of our partners, and it's incredibly inspiring. I think so many people who work in this kind of sector, in the development aid sector, tell the story of going overseas and just having their world turned upside down, seeing how really the majority of people on this planet live. It really does change your life, change your perspective on things. I haven't been out to see an emergency situation. You know, they are very, very difficult situations, as of course you can imagine. And sometimes people go to these situations with good intentions, but really just get in the way. But of course we have people that do that, and we have people that can talk about that. We have a humanitarian section within Christian Aid who support our partners, who will work on the ground doing whatever the work might be, and they will go out and overview the work and report back. So yes, that's something we can do if that's of help to anybody who wants to find out more about our humanitarian work. Well, thanks again for having me here at the Jamboree. It's been really good to be here, and I hope that some of you will turn out to be like Douglas Lister and start something amazing to help the poorest in our world. Thank you.